The origins of the Camorra are unclear. It may date to the 17th century as a direct Italian descendant of a Spanish secret society, the Garduña, founded in 1417. Recent historical research suggests that the Garduña did not exist, and its legendary status was based on a 19th century fictional book. According to historian John Dickey, the Garduña was a fictional organization that appeared from nowhere in a very popular French pulp novel published in 1845. The author probably based the story on Miguel de Cervantes' short story Rinconete and Cortadillo. It was an Italian translation in 1847 that spread the myth in Italy. More likely, the Camorra developed in the 18th century. Officials of the Kingdom of Naples may have introduced the organization to the area, or it may have developed gradually from small criminal gangs operating in Neapolitan society near the end of the 18th century. The first official use of Camorra as a word dates from 1735, when a royal decree authorized the establishment of 8 gambling houses in Naples. The word is likely a blend or portmanteau of capo, boss, and a Neapolitan street game, the morra. After gambling was prohibited by the local government, some people started making the players pay for protection against the attentions of passing police. The Camorra emerged during the chaotic power vacuum between 1799 and 1815, when the Parthenopean Republic was proclaimed on the wave of the French Revolution and the Bourbon Restoration. The first official mention of the Camorra as an organization dates from the year 1820, when police records detail a disciplinary meeting of the Camorra, a tribunal known as the Grand Mama. That year, the first written statute of the Camorra, the Freno, was discovered, indicating a stable organizational structure in the underworld. Another statute was discovered in 1842, related to initiation rites and funds set aside for the families of those imprisoned. The organization was also known as the Bella Società Riformata, Società del Lumer, or Onorata Società. The evolution into more organized formations indicated a qualitative change. The Camorra and Camorristi were no longer local gangs living off theft and extortion. They had a fixed structure and some kind of hierarchy. Another qualitative leap was the agreement between the liberal opposition and the Camorra following the defeat of the 1848 revolution. The liberals realized that they needed popular support to overthrow the king. They turned to the Camorra and paid them because the Camorristi were the leaders of the city's poor. The new police chief, Liborio Romano, appealed to the head of the Camorra, Salvatore de Crescenzo, to maintain order and appointed him as head of the municipal guard. In a few decades, the Camorra had developed into power brokers. In 1869, Ciccio Capuccio was elected as the Capintesta, head-in-chief of the Camorra by the 12 district heads, Capentriti, succeeding de Crescenzo after a short interregnum. He died in 1892. Following Italian unification in 1861, the government made attempts to suppress the Camorra. From 1882, it conducted a series of manhunts. The Sarreto Inquiry, 1900-1901, established to investigate corruption and bad governance in Naples, identified a system of political patronage run by what the report called the High Camorra. The original low Camorra held sway over the poor plebs in an age of abjection and servitude. Then there arose a High Camorra, comprising the most cunning and audacious members of the middle class. They fed off trade and public works contracts, political meetings, and government bureaucracy. This High Camorra strikes deals and does business with the Low Camorra, swapping promises for favors and favors for promises. The High Camorra thinks of the state bureaucracy as being like a field it has to harvest and exploit. Its tools are cunning, nerve, and violence. Its strength comes from the streets, and it is rightly considered to be more dangerous because it has re-established the worst form of despotism by founding a regime based on bullying. The High Camorra has replaced free will with impositions. It has nullified individuality and liberty, and it has defrauded the law and public trust. The inquiry introduced the terminology of High Camorra as having a bourgeois character and distinct from the plebeian Camorra proper. The two groups were in close contact through the figure of the intermediary, faccendiere. From the rich industrialist who wants a clear road into politics or administration, to the small shop owner who wants to ask for a reduction of taxes. From the businessman trying to win a contract to a worker looking for a job in a factory. From a professional who wants more clients or greater recognition to somebody looking for an office job. From somebody from the provinces who has come to Naples to buy some goods to somebody who wants to emigrate to America. They all find somebody stepping into their path, and nearly all made use of them. Scholars dispute whether the High Camorra was an integral part of the Camorra proper. Although the inquiry did not prove specific collusion between the Camorra and politics, it did reveal the patronage mechanisms that contributed to corruption in the municipality. The society's influence was weakened, which was exemplified by the defeat of all of their candidates in the 1901 Naples election. In the early 20th century, given the poverty of Naples and the region, many Camorristi emigrated to the United States. The Camorra received another blow with the Cuocolo trial, 1911 through 1912. The trial was ostensibly to prosecute those charged with the murder on the 6th of June 1906 of the Camorra boss Gennaro Cuocolo and his wife, who were suspected of being police spies. The main investigator, Carabinieri Captain Carlo Fabroni, transformed the trial into one against the Camorra as a whole, intending to use it to strike the final blow to the Camorra. The trial attracted much attention among newspapers and the general public, both in Italy and the United States, including by Pathé's Gazette. The hearings began in 1911. After 17 months, the often tumultuous proceedings ended with a guilty verdict on July 8, 1912, against defendants who included 27 leading Camorra bosses. They were sentenced to a total of 354 years' imprisonment. Enrico Alfano, the main defendant and nominal head of the Camorra, was sentenced to 30 years. Enrico Alfano was considered to be one of the chiefs of the Camorra, a mafia-type organization in the region of Campania and its capital Naples in Italy at the turn of the 20th century. He was described as a kind of president of the Confederation. According to some sources, Alfano was linked to the murder of New York City Police Lieutenant Joseph Petrosino in Palermo in 1909. However, the murder had since been attributed to the Sicilian Mafia. Alfano was accused of being the man behind the murder of rival Camorra boss Gennaro Cuocolo and his wife. The trial against Alfano and his associates in Viterbo in 1911 to 1912 expanded from a murder case into a tribunal against the Camorra and attracted a lot of attention of newspapers and the general public, both in Italy as well as in the United States. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison in July 1912, and despite the fact that the legitimacy of the trial was seriously questioned when the main witness for the prosecution retracted, he was only released in 1934 after having served 27 years. The son of a shoemaker, Alfano began as a fruit merchant in Naples and speculating on the cattle fairs. He apparently became affiliated with the Camorra at an early age, but this is not certain because he was not mentioned in a 1901 investigation report by the Ministry of Interior, known as the Cerrito Inquiry, since it was led by Senator Giuseppe Cerrito, which unearthed an extensive political patronage system in the city of Naples. However, the inquiry revealed little about the inner workings of the Camorra. According to an informer, Alfano had become the head of the Camorra after the death of the legendary Capintesta, head-in-chief, Ciccio Capuccio, in 1892, although other sources disagree over his rise to power. Both sources agree that Alfano imposed his position when he defeated the Camorra head, the Capintesta Totono o Pappagallo, or the parrot, so named for his beak parrot nose, in a zumpata, a kind of ritual initiation knife duel, despite the fact that his adversary sent his Mastino dog to attack Alfano. The conflict started when Papagallo returned from prison and found Alfano in control of his former territory. Other sources mention that after the death of Capuccio, Giuseppe Chirico, o Granatier, the Grenadier, from the Porta San Gennaro neighborhood was elected. Although the conclave of the 12 district heads had decided in favor of Chirico, another popular leader, Totano o Papagallo, with many followers, contested the election. The matter was settled in a zumpata. Chirico, due to his inexperience with weapons, was wounded at the first blow and, to save himself, threw the knife to the ground and declared himself defeated. After his win, O Papagallo was elected with all the votes, but had been sentenced to go to prison. 2 of the 12 districts, Vicaria and Mercato, decided that his alternate, the young Alfano, would assume effective powers. When O Papagallo left prison, he was defeated in yet another duel by Alfano around the turn of the century. According to La Stampa, describing the event many years after it took place, the duel went as follows. The clash took place near the Piazza dei Vergini. Totano had gone armed only with the knife, a fair weapon, and followed by a large mastiff, while Ericone had gone there armed with the revolver, an unfair weapon. As soon as they faced each other, Ericone drew his revolver and pointed it. Papagallo, unperturbed, ordered the hound to pounce on his rival, and before the latter had time to fire, the dog had bitten his right hand. Ericone passed his revolver through his left hand and fired, scratching his competitor in the cheek. Papagallo quietly wiped the little bit of blood dripping from his cheek, and then, without a care in the world, went away, whistling. Although elected head of the Camorra, due to his reluctance to accept the challenges coming from all sides, and all the inevitable quarrels that so abundantly flourished in the meetings of the bosses, he did not keep the position. Challenged by Gennaro Quaccolo, he was deposed and Luigi Fucci, known as O Gasusaro, became the nominal head, the capintesta, of the Camorra, while Alfano remained head of the Vicaria section. While Fucci was the nominal head, Alfano apparently remained the operational leader and was described as a kind of president of the Confederation. He had his own representative in the 12 districts next to the Capentrito Rionale that answered to Fucci. Alfano, freed from the care of governance, devoted himself exclusively to his lucrative trade, usury. He worked closely with his associate Giovanni Rappi, a former primary school teacher turned gambling operator and usurer, who after a gambling stint in France opened the Unione del Mezzogiorno Club in 1902 in Naples, popular among the aristocracy. Rappi and Alfano specialized in providing usury loans, at a rate of 30% per week and 50% per month, to merchants and gamblers, collecting extortion money as well as procuring. He lived the good life and dressed very elegantly in pool suits from London and Boivin shirts from Paris. He followed his rich clientele to the casinos in Nice, Monte Carlo, and Aix-les-Bains in the spring. Even the Naples Lighting Company paid protection money to prevent their wires being stolen. From the traditional ranks of criminals, a new brand of sophisticated camorristi evolved, the elegant Camorra, or Camorra in straw yellow gloves, in guanti gialli, that moved among the affluent strata of Neapolitan society and provided them the means to enjoy their vices, at a cost. These gentlemen mobsters mingled with the bourgeoisie in the Galleria Umberto Futh, a prestigious new arcade built as part of the reconstruction program following the cholera epidemic of 1884, where Alfano had his informal headquarters at the Café Fortunio. In 1902, the famous French vaudeville singer and dancer, and the vedette of the Folies Bergère, Eugénie Fougère, who was performing at the Salon Margherita, a café chantant in Naples, contacted Alfano to get back her stolen jewelry. Within a few days, Alfano tracked the thieves and restored the jewelry. The case hit the news headlines, and Alfano was arrested for complicity with the thieves, but was absolved. The power of Alfano reached as far as politics. Together with his right-hand men, the priest Ciro Vitozzi and his associate Giovanni Rappi, Alfano was said to be the man behind the election in 1904 of the Count Vincenzo Ravaschieri Foschi to Parliament, to the detriment of the incumbent socialist deputy Ettore Ciccati. The night before the election, dissident voters were intimidated, assaulted, beaten, and sustained knife injuries by ruffians hired and encouraged by both the Camorra and the police, since the authorities equally disapproved of a socialist candidate. Alfano, Rappi, and Vitozzi were seen and photographed while actively directing the vote in favor of Count Ravaschieri in the Camorra-controlled district of Vicaria, in which Ciccati surprisingly had won in 1900. Ravaschieri won the 1904 election. Alfano was charged with the murder of Gennaro Cuocolo and his wife, suspected of being police spies, on the 6th of June 1906. The murder case would develop into one of the most complicated legal cases of the early 20th century in Italy. The police moved quickly to arrest Alfano and his brother Ciro, Giovanni Rappi, and two members of the Camorra rank and file, Gennaro Iacovidi and Gennaro E. Bello. They had frequented a restaurant in Torre del Greco in the vicinity of the Cuocolo murder. However, the investigation did not produce evidence, and the suspects were released from jail 50 days later, not in the least thanks to the intervention of the priest Ciro Vitozzi, the guardian angel of the Camorra and Erricone's godfather. On the basis of Vitozzi's declarations and the testimony of Giacomo Ascritore, a regular police informer and member of the Camorra, the local police and judiciary of Naples identified Gaetano Amodeo and Tommaso De Angelis as the real killers. However, the murder investigation was transferred to the Carabinieri and delegated to Captain Carlo Fabroni. Fabroni accused the Naples police of inefficiency and corruption. The investigation got new momentum when Gennaro Abadamaggio, a young Camorrista and a former Carabinieri informer serving a jail sentence in Naples, testified that the decision to kill Cuocolo, suspected of being a police spy, had been taken at a meeting at the restaurant chaired by Alfano. The developments of the case and suspected police corruption were discussed in Parliament several times. Meanwhile, after his release, Alfano left Naples and went from village to village to elude arrest. The Carabinieri located him in San Lucio, near Caserta, but he managed to escape. He fled to Rome, obtained a false passport, and sailed for the United States from Marseille, France. He disembarked on the 17th of March 1907 in New York disguised as a member of the ship's crew, posing as a stoker. In New York, he began to run a gambling den in the basement of 108 Mulberry Street, the heart of Manhattan's Little Italy. He became one of the primary underworld targets of Police Sergeant Joseph Petrosino of the New York City Police Department, who believed Alfano to be a big player in the New York branch of the Camorra. Petrosino received anonymous letters from Neapolitans in New York that confirmed Alfano's presence in the city, where he allegedly had given a banquet to several local Camorra members in a Grand Street restaurant. On the 17th April 1907, Petrosino and his agents raided the apartment at 108 Mulberry Street where Alfano was living and arrested him. The arrest caused a sensation in Naples. He had been convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude in Italy and was turned over to the federal authorities. Within 3 days, he was expelled and put on a ship to Le Havre in France, where he was picked up by the Italian police. He was put behind bars in Naples. According to some sources, Alfano was linked to the Lieutenant Petrosino's murder in Palermo on the 12th of March 1909, which has since been attributed to the Sicilian Mafia and to Vito Cascioferro in particular. Back in Italy, Alfano stood trial at Viterbo for the Cuocolo murders. On March 27, 1909, the assistant public prosecutor committed 47 persons for trial by the Court of Assizes in Naples. However, due to many attempts to corrupt the authorities and other obstacles, the trial was transferred to the Court of Assizes in Viterbo, 250 kilometers from Naples and 80 kilometers north of Rome. The often uproarious and spectacular Cuocolo trial attracted a lot of attention of newspapers and the general public both in Italy as well as in the United States, including by Pathé's Gazette. The trial was transformed from a murder trial into one against the Camorra as a whole. The hearings began in the spring of 1911 and would continue for 12 months. Fabroni intended to use the trial to strike the final blow to the Camorra. The trial was attended by the former mayor of New York City, George B. McClellan, in whose administration Petrosino was killed. Funds to pay the defendants' lawyers were reportedly collected in Naples and from Neapolitan restaurants in New York. The amount collected was 50,000 lire, or $10,000, at the start of the trial. Giovanni Rappi, the Camorra's treasurer, had an interest in a private bank in New York, where the savings of immigrants were forwarded to Italy. The New York Defense Fund treasurer was Andrea Attanasio, also sought in connection with the Cuocolo matter. The trial was Captain Fabroni's finest moment. He testified in 21 hearings and his testimony filled 285 pages. He accused the police, politicians, and even the judiciary of being involved with the Camorra. Alfano claimed he was innocent. "I am the victim of yellow journalism," he told the judge. "I have been ruined by the Carabinieri. The story that I have been the head of the Camorra is a legend. I was neither its head nor its tail. I admit that I have committed some excesses. What youth of my social class in Naples has not?" After a 17-month trial, the often tumultuous proceedings ended with a guilty verdict on the 8th of July 1912. The defendants, including 27 leading Camorra bosses, were sentenced to a total of 354 years imprisonment. The main defendants, Enrico Alfano and Giovanni Rappi, were sentenced to 30 years. The priest Vitozzi received 7 years and government witness Abbatamaggio 5 years. The jury had been held in isolation since March 1911. The reports of the proceedings were about 40,000 pages in 63 volumes. In his last statement before the verdict, a furious Alfano accused the authorities to have killed his brother Shiro, who had died in prison. Another defendant, Gennaro de Marinis, who was sentenced to 30 years as well, slashed his throat with a piece of glass in the court when the verdict was delivered. After his conviction, Alfano was transferred to the prison of Sassari on the island of Sardinia. As the New York Times reported, the convicts did all in their power to see the great criminal and pay him a kind of court, putting themselves at his disposition as subjects would to a sovereign. Many fan letters addressed to him arrived at the penitentiary, including love letters from women. In prison, he took up the old family trade of shoemaking. In 1927, 15 years later, government witness Gennaro Abbatamaggio withdrew his accusations. However, despite serious doubts of several magistrates about the legitimacy of the trial, the case was never reopened. Abbatamaggio had invented everything about a crime of which he knew nothing. Captain Fabroni had spent 350,000 lire to pay the witnesses, according to Abbatamaggio, and he described the case as a setup against the leaders of the Neapolitan Camorra, organized by him in accordance with the collaborators of Captain Fabroni. In 1930, a request for pardon was made by the Neapolitan newspaper The Mattino, which at the time of the trial had strongly supported the work of the police. Alfano's sister, Rosina Alfano, tried to convince the suspected real killer Gaetano Amodeo, who privately admitted to have been the slayer and had been identified as such by the first inquiry of the Naples police, to publicly confess the murder, which he refused to do. In subsequent years, the requests for pardon came before Benito Mussolini one by one. In his own hand, the Deuce wrote on those instances, "Provisions should be individually, ranging measures over time." Enrico Alfano was granted a conditional release for good behavior on the 16th of October 1934, after serving 27 years of his sentence. The Camorra has never been a unified, centralized organization, but instead a loose confederation of different independent clans, groups, or families. Each group is bound by kinship ties and controlled economic activities that took place in its particular geographic territory. Each clan takes care of its own business, protects its territory, and sometimes tries to expand at another group's expense. There is some minimal coordination to avoid mutual interference. The families compete to maintain a system of checks and balances among equal powers. One of the Camorra's strategies to gain social prestige was and remains political patronage. The family clans became the preferred go-betweens of local politicians and public officials because of their grip on the community. In turn, the family bosses used their political sway to assist and protect their clients against the local authorities. Through a mixture of brute force, political status, and social leadership, the Camorra clans gained ground as middlemen between the local community and bureaucrats and politicians at national level. They granted privileges and protection and intervened in favor of their clients, in return for their silence and connivance against local authorities and the police. With their political connections, the heads of the major Neapolitan families became power brokers in local and national political contexts, providing Neapolitan politicians with broad electoral support, and in return, receiving benefits for their constituency. Compared to the Sicilian Mafia's pyramidal structure, the Camorra has more of a horizontal structure. As a result, Camorra clans act independently of one another and are more prone to feuding. This, however, makes the Camorra more resilient when top leaders are arrested or killed, as new clans and organizations emerge from the remnants of old ones. Clan leader Pasquale Galasso stated in court, "Campania can get worse because you could cut into a Camorra group, but another 10 could emerge from it." In the 1970s and 1980s, Raffaele Cutolo made an unsuccessful attempt to unify the Camorra families in the manner of the Sicilian Mafia by forming the new organized Camorra, Nuova Camorra Organizzata, or NCO. Raffaele Cutolo was born in Ottaviano, a municipality in the hinterland of Naples, in a family without ties in the Camorra. His fatherless youth was spent in a close-knit Catholic environment. His father was an agricultural laborer who for years tilled a field as a sharecropper as a means to support his family. While still a child, the landowner told Cutolo's father that the following year the field would be used for a different purpose, and that his services were no longer required. In desperation, his father turned to the local Camorra boss, whose word was law in the village. The boss invited the Cutolo family to his home and promised to settle everything. A short time later, the landowner changed his mind and the contract was renewed. A bad student, violent and inattentive, at 12 he was already roaming the streets with a gang of teenagers, committing petty burglaries and harassing shopkeepers. As soon as he could drive, he bought a car, both for prestige and because it allowed him greater mobility in his raids. At the age of 21, he committed his first homicide. He killed a man whose girlfriend had been slapped by Cutolo due to an alleged insult. In the ensuing fight, he pulled out a gun and shot him to death. He was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment, reduced to 24 years after appeal. He was sent to Poggioriale prison in Naples. Entering prison on a murder conviction made him a tough guy. In prison, Cutolo learned the rules of the criminal world. He became a man of honor, paid respect to more powerful inmates, and started gathering personal prestige because of his striking personality. He never lost sight of his ambition and his desire to become one of the biggest bosses of the Neapolitan underworld. Cutolo had established himself as a ringleader when Antonio Spavone, known as O Malamo, the Bad Man, was transferred to Poggioriale prison. He challenged Spavone to a knife fight in the courtyard, a practice called Odieramento, the declaration, but Spavone refused. The challenged boss allegedly limited himself to a reply, "Today's young men want to die young by whatever means." Spavone was released from prison shortly after this event. From his prison cell, Cutolo ordered the murder of Spavone. A hitman, allegedly Cutolo's friend, shot Spavone in the face from short range with a shotgun. Spavone survived the ambush, but the shotgun blast left considerable damage to his facial structure, which required plastic surgery. Spavone immediately resigned from his highly visible role as a Camorra boss. Cutolo was soon able to gather under him a small group of prisoners, the nucleus of which would later become the leadership of the NCO. They were Antonino Cuomo, known as O Maranghiello, the cudgel, Pasquale Barra, known as O Nimale, the animal, Giuseppe Puca, known as O Giappone, Japanese, Pasquale D'Amico, known as O Cartonaro, the cardboard picker, and Vincenzo Casillo, known as O Neroni, the big black. After being released, they would set up criminal activities on the outside, which would be directly controlled by Cutolo from within the penitentiary system. From within Naples' Poggio Reale prison, Cutolo built a new organization, the Nuova Camorra Organizzata (NCO). He began by befriending young inmates unfamiliar with jail, giving them a sense of identity and worth, so much so that when they were released, they would send Cutolo flowers, i.e. money, which enabled him to increase his network. He helped poorer prisoners by buying food for them from the jail store or arranging for food to be sent in from outside. In such ways, he created many debts or rain checks, which he would cash at the opportune moment. As his following grew, he also began to exercise a monopoly of violence within a number of prisons, thus increasing his power. By the early 70s, Cutolo had become so powerful that he was able to decide which of his followers would be moved to which jails, use a prison governor's telephone to make calls anywhere in the world, and allegedly even slap the prison governor on one occasion for daring to search his cell. Another key bond Cutolo created was regular payments to the families of NCO members sent to prison, thereby guaranteeing the allegiance of both prisoners and their families. What is unusual about Cutolo is that he has a kind of ideology, another factor that appealed to rootless and badly educated youths. He founded the NCO in his hometown Ottaviano on the 24th of October 1970, the day of his patron saint, San Raffaele. In such a way, he created the most powerful organization ever to exist in the Neapolitan hinterland. Using his personal appeal and almost magic charisma, he was able to achieve this single-handedly. He had strong ties with the Calabrian 'Ndrangheta. According to some pentiti, his career started with his affiliation with the 'Ndrangheta, supported by important bosses such as Piero Mali, Paolo De Stefano, and Mammoliti. Cutolo based his organization of the NCO on the model of the 'Ndrangheta, its internal codes and rituals. The NCO strongholds were the towns to the east of Naples, such as Ottaviano, and Cutolo appealed to a Campanian rather than Neapolitan sense of identity, perhaps as a result of his poor peasant background. For instance, he is once reported as having said, "The day when the people of Campania understand that it is better to eat a slice of bread as a free man than to eat a steak as a slave is the day when Campania will win." The organization was unique in the history of the Camorra in that it was highly centralized and possessed a rudimentary form of ideology. For example, he publicly declared that children were not to be kidnapped or mistreated, and allegedly arranged the assassination of at least one kidnapper. Perhaps the most potent ideological weapon was the cult of violence, which sometimes bordered on a kind of death wish, as Cutolo once wrote, "The value of a life doesn't consist of its length, but in the use made of it. Often people live a long time without living very much. Consider this, my friends. As long as you are on this earth, everything depends on your willpower, not on the number of years you have lived." Through his book of thoughts and poems, Poesie e Pensieri, and his many interviews with journalists, Cutolo was able to create a strong sense of identity among his members. The book was published in Naples in 1980, but never distributed to the public. The book, containing 235 pages of poems and pictures, was seized by the police and censored as an apology of a criminal organization. According to the Justice Department, this book was viewed by NCO members as the Bible of the NCO, and was particularly popular in prison due to Kutolo's own distribution by mail. Even though his book was impounded by magistrates within days of its publication, many prisoners, alienated from society both inside and outside jail, wrote to Kutolo and other NCO leaders asking for a copy. Its possession alone would later be considered incriminating evidence. He openly supported the young inmates who were confronted with abuse, brutality, physical aggression, and rape. He provided them with advice and protection from the brutalities of other inmates. At the same time, they learned how to behave as a good pichotto, the lowest entry level into the Camorra. He challenged the old Camorra bosses and gave the youngsters a structure to belong to. The new Camorra must have a statute, a structure, an oath, a complete ceremony, a ritual that must excite people to the point that they would risk their lives for this organization. Kutolo was revered by his soldiers. They called him Prince and kissed his left hand as if he were a bishop. He spent a great amount of time researching the 19th century Camorra and reconstructed the old Camoristic ritual of initiation. He took great care in making the ritual a binding social practice. In his cell, he created a ceremony in which the initiate received the award of the primo regalo, first gift, also called abbraccio, embrace, or fiore, flower. He infused the old Camoristic traditions with Catholicism and reconstituted the ritual of initiation of the traditional Camorra. In Poggioriale, where on average there were 25 prisoners to a cell, Kutolo managed to obtain a cell to himself with a shower, while Giovanni Pandico, his own personal cook and underwriter, occupied the cell next door so that he could serve dishes on request. When he was transferred to a smaller penitentiary, where his cell was carpeted and fitted with a color television and sound system, in Ascoli Piceno, he requested that Pandico follow him, and his request was promptly granted by the prison authorities. Kutolo referred to the prison as the state of Poggioriale, and is once reported to have stated, "I am the king of the Camorra. I take from the rich and give to the poor." As a prisoner, he dressed impeccably with ties and designer shirts, a gold watch, and shoes of crocodile skin. His daily meals consisted of lobster and champagne. The Justice Department found out that between 5 March 1981 and 18th of April 1982, Kutolo received money orders for an amount of 55 million lire to take care of his daily expenses, of which he reportedly spent half on food and clothes. As Kutolo spent most of his time in prison, from where he sent out his instructions, the everyday running of the enterprise was entrusted to his elder sister, Rosetta Kutolo. Her nickname was Occhiaccio, meaning ice eyes. Rosetta, a gray-haired, pious-looking woman, lived alone for years, tending her roses. She ruled in the Castle Medicio, the headquarters of the organization, a vast 16th-century palace with 365 rooms and a large park with tennis courts and swimming pool. The castle was bought for several billion lire and provided direct contact for Kutolo from the prisons of Poggioriale and Ascoli Piceno. Brilliant with figures, Rosetta Kutolo negotiated with South American cocaine barons, narrowly failed to blow up a police headquarters, and was glamorized in a film, The Professor. After her plan to blow up a police headquarters narrowly failed, her stronghold was raided. Kutolo escaped under a rug in a car driven past checkpoints by the neighborhood priest. She then went underground, remaining at liberty for the next 10 years. In 1993, she gave herself up and was charged only with mafia association. Prosecutors alleged she had been running her brother's organization. She was acquitted 9 times of murder. Rosetta had persuaded the authorities she was harmless, which was helped by her frumpy image. However, Raffaele Kutolo has always maintained that Rosetta knew nothing of his criminal activities and did only what he asked. Rosetta has never been a Camorrista. She only listened to me and sent me a few suitcases of money to prisoners like I told her to. Nevertheless, it is clear that Kutolo had always wanted to maintain a male-only organization based on principles such as criminal fraternity and so could never be seen giving a role to his sister. It could be argued that he did not want to implicate her, and therefore always insisted that she was innocent. Moreover, many important members did not believe that she held an important role because she was a woman. For instance, former NCO Lieutenant and Pentiti Pascual Barra argued, "What has Rosa Cutolo got to do with it? What have women got to do with the Camorra?" Raffaele Cutolo decided to expand the Camorra to Apulia. The outcome was not what he had planned. At first, local criminals were managing the illegal trades while the Camorra lent financial resources and support, demanding 40% of all profits derived from illegal activities. This arrangement proved to be an unstable one. Soon the local criminals tried to free themselves from the masters. In 1981, one of them, Giuseppe Rogoli, founded the Sacra Corona Unita, a new mafia invoking the regional Pugliese identity against the intrusion of the foreign Neapolitans. The NCO spread like wildfire in the crisis-ridden Campanian towns of the late 1970s, offering alienated youths an alternative to a lifetime of unemployment or poorly paid jobs. Hundreds of young men were employed as enforcers. Initially, the main specialization of NCO gangs was extorting money through protection rackets from local businesses. While the traditional Camoristic families held territorial powers and the consequent responsibility over their controlled areas, the NCO had no qualms over breaking the established social fabric by extorting shopkeepers, small factories and businesses, and building contractors. In its quest for cash, it even targeted individuals such as landlords, lawyers, and professionals. The NCO's protection racket even included a transient circus. The NCO later branched out to cocaine trafficking, partly because it was less subject to police investigation than heroin, but also because the Sicilian Mafia was less involved in the cocaine trade. At the end of the 1970s, two different types of Camorra organizations were beginning to take shape. On one side, there was Cutolo's NCO, which dealt mainly in cocaine and protection rackets, preserving a strong regional sense of identify. On the other side, the business-oriented Camorra clans linked to the Sicilian Cosa Nostra, like the clans of Michele Zaza and Lorenzo Nuvoletta, who dealt in cigarettes and heroin, but soon moved on to invest in real estate and construction firms. Cutolo's NCO became more powerful by encroaching and taking over other groups' territories. The NCO was able to break the circle of traditional power held by the families. Cutolo's organization was too aggressive and violent to be resisted by any individual families. Other Camorra families initially were too weakened, too divided, and simply too intimidated by the NCO. He requested that if other criminal groups wanted to keep their business, they had to pay the NCO protection on all their activities, including a percentage for each carton of cigarettes smuggled into Naples. This practice came to be known as ICA, Imposta Camorra Junta, or Camoristic Sale Tax, mimicking the state VAT sale tax A, Imposta sul Valore Aggiunto. For instance, Michele Zaza, the biggest Neapolitan cigarette smuggler, was reported to have paid the NCO more than 4 billion lire in the first 3 months after the imposition of the racket. However, no hierarchy between Camorra gangs or stable spheres of influence had been created, and no gang leader was likely to agree to be subdued by Cutolo without making a fight of it. In 1978, Zaza formed a Honorable Brotherhood, Onorata Fratellanza, in an attempt to get the Sicilian Mafia-aligned Camorra gangs to oppose Cutolo and his NCO, although without much success. A year later, in 1979, the more successful Nuova Famiglia was formed to contrast Cutolo's NCO. It consisted of various powerful and charismatic Camorra clan leaders from the areas around Naples, such Carmine Alfieri of Saviano, Pasquale Galasso of Poggiomarino, Mario Fabricino of the Vesuvius area, the Nuvoletta clan of Marano, Antonio Bardolino from Casal di Principe, patriarch of the so-called Casalesi, and Michele Zaza, known as O Pazzo or the Madman from Portici, who made France his base of operations. From 1980 to 1983, a bloody war raged in and around Naples, which left several hundred dead and severely weakened the NCO. Between the 16th and 19th of June 1983, police arrested 1,000 members of the NCO. Kutolo was instrumental in obtaining the release of Shiro Cirillo, the Christian Democrat member of the regional government of Campania, in charge of urban planning, who had been abducted by the Red Brigades in April 1981. He was released within 3 months because, so rumor has it, the Christian Democrats paid Kutolo to use his influence with the Red Brigades. Publicly, the Christian Democrats had refused to negotiate with terrorists, but privately, leading politicians and members of the secret services visited Kutolo in prison and asked him to negotiate with imprisoned members of the Red Brigades. A large ransom was paid to win Cirillo's release. In return, Kutolo allegedly asked for a slackening of police operations against the Camorra, for control over the tendering of building contracts in Campania, a lucrative venture since Campania was hit by a devastating earthquake in November 1980, and for a reduction of his own sentence, as well as new psychiatric tests to show that he is not responsible for his actions. Both these last concessions were granted. Kutolo overplayed his hand in the Cirillo affair. His former political protectors turned and provided their support to his main rival, Carmine Alfieri. When his main military chief, Vincenzo Casillo, was killed in January 1983 by the allies of Alfieri, it was clear Kutolo had lost the war. His power declined considerably. Not only Kutolo, but many other Camorra gangs understood the shift in the balance of power caused by the death of Casillo. They abandoned the NCO and allied themselves with Alfieri. His sister, who ran the business, was arrested in 1993. He was moved to a prison on the island Asanara, far away from Naples, and his ability to communicate with the outside was severely restricted when the harsh 41 bis prison regime was imposed upon him. In 2005, he asked for clemency in a letter to the Italian president. "I am tired and ill. I want to spend my last years at home." In 1983, he married Immacolata in prison. The couple never consummated their marriage. A 6-year legal battle allowed Kutolo the right to father a child, Denise, through artificial insemination. Kutolo had previously had a son, Roberto, from a previous marriage who was shot dead in Trinidad on December 24, 1990, aged 28, in gang violence. His killers were later found dead, their faces riddled with bullets. The murder had been ordered by Mario Fabricino, the boss of the Fabricino clan, as revenge for Kutolo ordering the death of his brother Francesco in the 1980s. Fabricino was eventually convicted of Roberto's murder and sentenced to life imprisonment in 2005. Kutolo thought of himself as a predestined man with supernatural powers, able to heal the wounded and raise the dead. Various psychiatric examinations assessed him to be psychotic, hysteric, and a megalomaniac. He thought that he had been sent to Earth to save the Neapolitan people. As he said during a trial in 1980, "I saw 4 knights with lance and buckler, black capes around their shoulders. They saw me and smiled. At that moment, I understood that I was given the task of rebuilding the Camorra on new and more efficient bases, so that the tradition of our fathers would not be lost. I am the reincarnation of the most glorious moments of the Neapolitan past. I am the Messiah for the suffering prisoners. I dispense justice. I am the only real judge who takes from the usurers and gives to the poor. I am the true law. I do not recognize the Italian justice." During a psychiatric evaluation, Kutolo claimed to have revived his aunt when he was 18. One night she had entered into what had appeared to be an irreversible coma. Kutolo went close to her and said, "Get up! We don't have the money for your funeral." She then got up. According to Adriano Baglivo of the Corriere della Sera, the old lady came back to consciousness due to the emergency care of a physician familiar with her history of catatonic attacks. However, for Kutolo, this episode assumed the character of a miracle and sign of his inner powers. When Valerio Fioravanti, a neo-fascist and fellow Paggioriale inmate sentenced for political terrorism, asked Cutolo the reason for his charisma. He replied, "Naples is divided into lords and beggars. If I have charisma, it is because I can offer a prompt promotion from the second category to the first one." In prison, Cutolo received a significant amount of fan mail from youth who were impressed with his achievements, as well as his ability to outsmart the authorities. Generally viewing themselves as marginal and exploited, they were attracted by his notoriety, flamboyant personality, and charisma. For instance, a letter from two teenage girls from Acera, which were intercepted by prison authorities, read as follows: "Seeing that it is difficult for us to find somebody who can understand, and having watched your interview on television, we thought of explaining our situation to you, a person whom we truly admire. We don't like this society, and soon we will go to Milan, and we will live there and become successful, giving a lesson to the people of this dirty country." During an interview with the media, Cutolo reminisced about his life. "I don't regret anything about my life. Crime is always a wrong move. It's true. However, we live in a society that is worse than criminality. Better to be crazy than to be a dreamer. A crazy man can be returned to reason. For a dreamer, he can only lose his head. A Camorrista must be humble, wise, and always ready to bring joy where there is pain. Only thus will he become a good Camorrista before God. I am far from being a saint. I've made people cry, and I've done harm to those who wanted to harm me, making me cry. A Camorrista is one who declares himself by his lifestyle. Drive-by shootings by Camorristi often result in casualties among the local population, but such episodes are often difficult to investigate because of the widespread practice of omertà, code of silence. According to a report published in 2007 by Confesercenti, the second largest Italian trade organization, the Camorra control the milk and fish industries, the coffee trade, and over 2,500 bakeries in Naples. In 1983, Italian law enforcement estimated that there were about a dozen Camorra clans. By 1987, the estimate had risen to 26, and in the following year to 32. Roberto Saviano, an investigative journalist and author of Gomorrah, an exposé of the activities of the Camorra, says that this sprawling network of clans now dwarfs the Sicilian Mafia, the 'Ndrangheta, and southern Italy's other organized gangs, in numbers, in economic power, and in ruthless violence. From 2004 to 2005, the Di Lauro clan and the so-called Sicionisti di Secondigliano fought a bloody feud which came to be known in the Italian press as the Scampia feud. The result was over 100 street killings. At the end of October 2006, a new series of murders took place in Naples between 20 competing clans, costing 12 lives in 10 days. The Interior Minister, Giuliano Amato, decided to send more than 1,000 extra police and carabinieri to Naples to fight crime and protect tourists. Despite this, in the following year there were over 120 murders. In 2001, the businessman Domenico Noviello from Caserta testified against a Camorra extortionist and subsequently received police protection. In 2008, he refused further protection and was killed 1 week later. In recent years, various Camorra clans have been allegedly using alliances with Nigerian drug gangs and the Albanian Mafia. Augusto Latorre, the former Latorre clan boss who became a pentito, is married to an Albanian woman. The first foreign pentito, a Tunisian, admitted to being involved with the feared Casalesi clan of Casal di Principe. The first town in which the Camorra sanctioned stewardship by a foreign clan was Castel Volturno, which was given to the Rapaces, clans from Lagos and Benin City in Nigeria. This allowed them to traffic cocaine and women in sexual slavery before sending them across Europe. A Camorra member, Nunzio Perello, was arrested in 1992 and began collaborating with authorities. He had stated, "The rubbish is gold." The boss of the Casalesi clan, Gaetano Vassallo, admitted to systematically working for 20 years to bribe local politicians and officials to gain their acquiescence to dumping toxic waste. The triangle of death and the waste management crisis is primarily a result of government failure to control illegal waste dumping. The government had attempted to mandate recycling and waste management programs, but were unable, causing the expansion of opportunities for illegal activities, which caused further barriers to solve the waste crisis. Since the 1980s, the Camorra has taken over the handling of waste disposal in the region of Campania. By December 1999, all regional landfills had reached capacity. Reports in 2008 stated that the crisis was caused at least in part by the Camorra, which created a lucrative business in the municipal waste disposal business, mostly in the Triangle of Death. With the complicity of industrial companies, heavy metals, industrial waste, and chemicals and household waste are frequently mixed together, then dumped near roads and burned to avoid detection, leading to severe soil and air pollution. In November 2013, a demonstration by tens of thousands of people was held in Naples in protest against the pollution caused by the Camorra's control of refuse disposal. Over a 20-year period, it was alleged, about 10 million tons of industrial waste had been illegally dumped, with cancers caused by pollution increasing by 47%. According to Giacomo D'Alisa et al., the situation worsened during this period as the Camorra diversified their illegal waste disposal strategy. 1. Transporting and dumping hazardous waste in the countryside by truck. 2. Dumping waste in illegal caves or holes. 3. Mixing toxic waste with textiles to avoid explosions and then burning it. And 4. Mixing toxic with urban waste for disposal in landfills and incinerators. The Camorra has proven to be an extremely difficult organization to fight within Italy. During the 1911 to 1912 trial, Fabroni gave testimony on how complicated it was to successfully prosecute the Camorra. The Camorrist has no political ideals. He exploits the elections and the elected for gain. The leaders distribute bans throughout the town, and they have recourse to violence to obtain the vote of the electors for the candidates whom they have determined to support. Those who refuse to vote as instructed are beaten, slashed with knives, or kidnapped. All this is done with assurance of impunity, as the Camorrists will have the protection of successful politicians who realize that they cannot be chosen to office without paying toll to the Camorra. Unlike the Sicilian Mafia, which has a clear hierarchy and a division of interests, the Camorra's activities are much less centralized. This makes the organization much more difficult to combat through crude repression. In Campania, where unemployment is high and opportunities are limited, the Camorra has become an integral part of the fabric of society. It offers a sense of community and provides the youth with jobs. Members are guided in the pursuit of criminal activities, including cigarette smuggling, drug trafficking, and theft. The government has made an effort to combat the Camorra's criminal activities in Campania. The solution ultimately lies in Italy's ability to offer values, education, and work opportunities to the next generation. However, the government has been hard-pressed to find funds for promoting long-term reforms that are needed to improve the local economic outlook and create jobs. Instead, it has had to rely on limited law enforcement activity in an environment that has a long history of tolerance and acceptance of criminality and is governed by the omertà. Despite the overwhelming magnitude of the problem, law enforcement officials continue their pursuit. The Italian police are coordinating their efforts with Europol and Interpol to conduct special operations against the Camorra. The Carabinieri and the financial police, Guardia di Finanza, are also fighting criminal activities related to tax evasion, border controls, and money laundering. Prefect Gennaro Monaco, Deputy Chief of Police and Chief of the Section of Criminal Police, cites impressive results against the Camorra in recent years, yet the Camorra continues to grow in power. In 1998, police took a leading Camorra figure into custody. Francesco Schiavone was caught hiding in a secret apartment near Naples behind a sliding wall of granite. The mayor of Naples, Antonio Bassolino, compared the arrest to that of Sicilian Mafia chief Salvatore Riina in 1993. Schiavone is now serving a life sentence after a criminal career which included arms trafficking, bomb attacks, armed robbery, and murder. Francesco Schiavone started his criminal career as a driver and bodyguard of Umberto Amaturo. His first arrest was in 1972 for illegal possession of firearms. Schiavone was involved in several bloody clan wars of the Camorra, in which dozens of people were killed in the Naples area in the past decades. He sided with Antonio Bardolino, the founder of the Casalesi clan and prominent leader of the Nuova Famiglia, and Mario Iovine against the Nuova Camorra Organizzata, NCO, of Raffaele Cutolo. When the NCO was defeated, an internal feud broke out between Bardolino and Iovine. Schiavone, together with Francesco Bidognetti and Vincenzo Di Falco, sided with Iovine. A new feud broke out between the Di Falco clan and Iovine Schiavone. In December 1990, Di Falco allegedly betrayed them, making a tip-off to police against Schiavone and Francesco Bidognetti, and the latter's ordered Vincenzo Di Falco's killing on February 2, 1991, in Casal di Principe. In retaliation, his brother Nunzio Di Falco killed Mario Iovine on March 6, 1991, in Portugal. While in custody, the Di Falco clan was defeated. As the old bosses, such as Bardolino and Iovine, and potential younger leaders like Bidognetti and Di Falco disappeared, he became the boss of the clan in the 1990s, being the strongest and most cunning of his generation. In 1993, after completing a 3-year prison sentence, Schiavone disappeared before judges could put him under surveillance. The Schiavone-Bidognetti clan now firmly led the Casalesi clan. After more than 5 years on the run, he was arrested on the 11th of July 1998 in his hideout, a secret apartment behind a sliding wall of granite in his Naples villa, equipped with high-tech tools. At the time, he was considered to be the Camorra's #1 fugitive. He had been living there with his wife and 7 children. Schiavone had already been arrested on at least 2 prior occasions, but each time he was able to avoid a lengthy sentence on legal technicalities. The mayor of Naples, Antonio Bassolino, praised the local police and said, "The head of one of the most dangerous criminal clans in southern Italy has been arrested." He compared the arrest to that of Sicilian Mafia chief Salvatore Riina in 1993. Police informers describe him as a charismatic figure with an entrepreneurial mind, not keen on violent action that only creates problems and police attention instead of business. In his hideout, police found a library dedicated to his idol Napoleon. While on the run, he fathered 3 of his 6 children. The Casalesi clan gathered immense wealth with skimming of public contracts for the construction of the A1 highway Rome-Naples and the prison in Santa Maria Capua Vetere. Ironically, many of its members ended up in that same prison. They also were active in waste management from the north of Italy in Caserta, and the distribution racket of dairy products by Parmalat and Cirio. Profits were invested in real estate in Parma and Milan. According to author Roberto Saviano, raised in Casal di Principe, the Schiavone family is immensely rich. In 2 legal proceedings against the Schiavone family in August 1996, authorities confiscated 450 billion lire. A year later, they seized another 515 billion. That adds up to $788 million from just one of the many families that make up the Casalesi, an amount that would bring any business to its knees. But the Schiavone family and the Casalesi continue to prosper. All told, they are estimated to be worth about $47 billion. The patrimony is managed by his wife, Giuseppina Nappa, and his brother Walter. He was finally sentenced to life on the 19th of June 2008, after a 10-year trial, named the Spartacus trial, against 36 members of the Casalesi clan charged with a string of murders and other crimes. Over the course of the first trial and the last appeal, 5 people involved in the case were murdered, including an interpreter. a judge and two journalists received death threats. Michele Zagaria, a senior member of the Casale clan, was arrested in 2011 after eluding police for 16 years. He was found in a secret bunker in the town Casa Pezzena near Naples. In 2014, clan boss Mario Riccio was arrested for drug trafficking in the Naples area. Around the same time, 29 suspected Camorra members were also arrested in Rome. The arrests in the Campania region demonstrate that the police are not allowing the Camorra to operate without intervention. However, progress remains slow, and these minor victories have done little to loosen the Camorra's grip on Naples and the surrounding regions. In 2008, Italian police arrested 3 members of the Camorra crime syndicate on the 30th of September 2008. According to Gianfrancesco Ciazzu, commander of the Carabinieri police, the 3 were captured in small villas on the coast of Naples. All 3 had been on Italy's 100 top most wanted list. Police seized assets valued at over €100 million and also weapons, including 2 AK-47 assault rifles that may have been used in the shooting of 6 Africans on the 18th of September 2008. Police found pistols, Carabinieri uniforms, and other outfits that were used to disguise members of the operation. During the same week, a separate operation netted 26 additional suspects in Caserta. All were believed to belong to the powerful Camorra crime syndicate that operates in and around Naples. The suspects were charged with extortion and weapons possession. In some cases, the charges also included murder and robbery. Giuseppina Nappa, the 48-year-old wife of a jailed crime boss, was among those arrested. She is believed to be the Camorra's local paymaster. The Italian state confiscated €30 million, including real estate in Luxembourg, belonging to Angelo Grillo, a businessman from Marcianise, considered very close to the Belforte clan. Grillo also owned the company Lynch Invest SA based in the country. In the name of this company, he purchased real estate in Campania and Sardinia. In November 2018, Italian police announced the arrest of Antonio Orlando, suspected of being a major figure in the Camorra. In February 2019, Ciro Rinaldi, boss of the Rinaldi clan, was arrested in a house in the region of San Pietro a Pacierno. He is accused of the double murder of Raffaele Ceparullo, member of a small gang linked to the Mazzarella clan, and Ciro Colonna, an innocent victim. Rinaldi is also considered responsible for the murder of Vincenzo de Bernardo, also linked to the Mazzarellas. At the time of his arrest, his clan was considered one of the most powerful clans of the Camorra, having all the eastern area of the city of Naples under its control and having as allies the Secondigliano alliance. On September 18, 2019, Ciro Rinaldi was sentenced to life imprisonment, considered to be the mastermind behind the murders of Ceparullo and Colonna. According to the reports, Rinaldi reportedly ordered Ceparullo's death, believing Ceparullo was planning to kill him to give pleasure to the Mazzarella clan, historical enemies of the Rinaldi clan. In March 2019, Marco Di Lauro, the second most wanted man in Italy, was arrested after spending 14 years on the run. He is the 4th son of ex-Camorra boss Paolo Di Lauro. In 2010, an informant said that he was responsible for at least 4 murders. In June 2019, the Italian police arrested more than 120 members of the Secondigliano alliance, the alliance created by the Licciardi, Contini, and Mallardo clans, in an anti-Camorra operation. The police also confiscated €130 million. Among those who were arrested were the wives of the bosses of the Bosti, Mallardo, Licciardi, and Contini clans, but also their lieutenants, children, grandchildren, and entrepreneurs who worked for the alliance. The historical female boss Maria Licciardi managed to escape from the arrest in the operation and is now considered a fugitive. 7 members of the organization were arrested in Spain, Netherlands, South America, and in the Balkans, places where they were running illicit business on behalf of the alliance. Maria Licciardi was born and raised in the Neapolitan suburb of Secondigliano, a traditional stronghold of the Licciardi clan. Her entire family belonged to the Camorra. Her father was a well-known guapo or local boss. One of her brothers, Gennaro Licciardi, known as a Scigna, the monkey, was a very powerful guapo who later became the head of the clan and a founding member of the Secondigliano Alliance, a coalition of powerful Camorra clans which controlled drug trafficking and the extortion rackets in many suburbs of Naples. Gennaro died from blood poisoning while in the Voghera prison on August 3, 1994. Maria's husband, Antonio Tegemie, was also in the Camorra. Maria Licciardi rose to power and took over as head of the clan after her 2 brothers, Pietro and Vincenzo, and her husband were arrested. She was the first female Camorrista to become the boss of the Licciardi clan and take over as head of the Secondigliano Alliance. The death of Gennaro Licciardi caused some disruption in the local underworld, as well as several bloody attempts to seize control, but the clan was kept in stable condition by Maria. She brought together a fragile, informal coalition of 20 Camorra clans in order to expand control of the city's most lucrative rackets, from drugs and cigarette smuggling to protection and prostitution. She also played a key role in expanding the city's drug trade market. Under her leadership, the Secondigliano Alliance became more organized, secretive, sophisticated, and consequently more powerful. She introduced many revolutionary changes to the clan. Perhaps the most important among them was the involvement in the prostitution trade. Prior to this, the Camorra had a code of conduct that forbade them from making money from prostitution. However, under Licciardi, this code was broken. The Camorra would buy the girls from the Albanian Mafia for 2,000. Many of them came on the promise of legitimate work in order to escape the crushing poverty of their homeland. But once they arrived, they were practically enslaved and forced into prostitution by the Camorra. Many such girls were underage. They were often put on drugs. This helped increase criminal activity, as they usually spent a large part of their income purchasing narcotics for consumption. Unlike many male Camorristi, Maria shunned the limelight and was never convicted or even suspected of any crime. One well-connected insider described her as radiating a steely charisma. According to police sources, she was reputed to be practical, charming, exceptionally intelligent, but just as ruthless as her male counterparts. She carried a cold and calculating approach in her criminal endeavors, reportedly taking her inspiration from Rosetta Cutolo, sister of Raffaele Cutolo, the boss of the Nuova Camorra Organizzata. Under her, the Licciardi clan generated a great amount of goodwill among the local populace, as it continued the old habit of giving an occasional handout to the neighborhood's poor. In Secondigliano, with no social security benefits provided to the people by the local government and an endemic unemployment rate, the clan provided the neighborhood with a principal source of employment. When the Pentito Gaetano Guida was asked in court about the role of Maria Licciardi and women in the Secondigliano Alliance, he replied, "They are on the front line. It has always been like this in the Secondigliano clan, in the sense that women, wives, sisters, and mothers of the leaders, have always had an influential role in many decisions." Maria Licciardi, Gennaro's sister, is representative of this. She took orders to and from her brother. She transmitted his orders and messages, even those of major importance. On more than one occasion, she transported his orders to kill. I don't recall the details, but I know that for our clan, talking with Maria Licciardi was the same as talking with Gennaro, the boss. I can add that the Secondigliano women took on all sorts of jobs on behalf of the alliance. They took messages to prisoners, distributed money to members, and organized activities, especially numbers running and extortion rackets. In other words, they constitute the backbone of the organization. Lucia Licciardi, no relation to Maria, was the only journalist to get access to her inner circle. In an interview, she described her management style as follows. She behaves just like the manager of a multinational. She always looks for a solution that's less likely to attract police attention, and that creates fewer splits within the clan. On Maria Licciardi, Judge Luigi Bobbio stated that the moment a woman takes charge of the organization, paradoxically, we witness a lowering of the emotional level and a better performance of the group's activities. Maria sought to control the possible impact of the testimonies of many pentiti in order to protect the clan. For instance, Italian police discovered that a few days after his escape from his protected location, Pentito Constantino Saro met Licciardi in order to ask for money in return for retracting statements on the clan's activities. The Secondigliano alliance was divided over this issue. Some wanted to pay him, others wanted to pay him, and then murder him and his family. In January 1998, Maria was stopped in a car with her sister Assunta and her sister-in-law with around 300 million lire, which the prosecutors believe was her purported payment to him. She refused to disclose as to what the money was for, and she faded into obscurity immediately after lawyers secured her release. The reign of Maria Licciardi ran smoothly for many years until a disagreement arose over a consignment of pure, unrefined heroin. In the spring of 1999, a large consignment of heroin arrived from Istanbul, Turkey. Maria decreed it should not be sold, as it was too pure and strong for the average user, and would thus kill those who purchased it, harming the alliance's large customer base of drug users. However, the Lo Russo clan, who had always chafed under her leadership, disagreed and packaged the shipment for sale on the street. The sale of the packets of unrefined heroin resulted in the deaths of many drug addicts across Naples, 11 of whom died in April 1999 alone. This caused great public outrage and resulted in massive police crackdowns on the Camorra clans. Many Camorristi were arrested and subsequently imprisoned. The Lo Russo clan eventually split from the alliance, leading to disintegration and a bloody gang war, including the use of car bombs and bazooka attacks. Clans began fighting over turf and attempted to destroy or take other clans' business. When 4 clan members were murdered in her stronghold of Secondigliano, Licciardi was forced to retaliate. She mobilized her foot soldiers for an all-out counterattack. The deadly gang wars resulted in nearly 120 deaths in Naples and the surrounding region. It was around this time that investigators became aware of Licciardi's existence. Licciardi was added on the 30 Most Wanted Italians list and went into hiding. Thanks to a sophisticated network of protection set up by her clan, Licciardi was able to evade capture for 2 years, and despite having changed her refuge several times, never left the Masseria Cardone district. While on the lam, she continued as the undisputed boss of the Licciardi clan and ordered several murders of rival mobsters. She went to war with the Giuliano clan of Forcella, which was headed by another female Camorra boss, Erminia Giuliano, who took control after the arrest of her brother, Luigi Giuliano. When the senior prosecutor Luigi Bobbio began making successful prosecutions against her clan, Licciardi felt that he was getting closer to discovering her whereabouts. In January 2001, she bombed Bobbio's office building. The bombing was delivered as a warning to stop the investigation of her clan's activities and also to stop any further prosecution of her clan members. However, the bombing did not stop Bobbio from continuing his investigations. On the contrary, he was put under police protection and continued his prosecutions against the clan undeterred. Over 70 members of the Licciardi clan were arrested. They refused to cooperate with prosecutors and served their prison sentences. The police made many fruitless efforts to catch Licciardi. In April 2000, the Carabinieri arrested 13 Camorra bosses who were holding a summit around a table in a rural farmhouse between the districts of Qualiano and Giugliano. The group was allegedly discussing how to invest its funds in a network of furniture and children's clothing stores. However, Licciardi was not among them. On the 9th of June 2001, several hundred heavily armed officers, backed by helicopter spotters, launched an intensive search operation in and around Secondigliano. Acting on a tip-off, they stormed a dilapidated building that she had been known to use as a hideout. Licciardi was nowhere to be found, but police discovered that inside an attic guarded by surveillance cameras, she had installed marble floors, a grand piano, and an outsized jacuzzi. Her repeated successes in evading capture by the police inspired local journalists to dub her the Scarlet Pimpernel of Italy. June 14, 2001, Maria Licciardi was arrested by the Naples police while traveling with a married couple on board a car around Melito, near Naples. She did not resist arrest and was ultimately taken to prison. The man accused of aiding her was arrested as well, whereas his wife was released due to her being a mother of a child. After her arrest, police noticed she looked just like the popular mugshot of her that was released years earlier. After her arrest, her brother Vincenzo Licciardi took over as the head of the clan. Vincenzo was himself eventually arrested on February 7, 2008, after having been included on the list of most wanted fugitives in Italy since 2004. Although in prison, she still commanded the clan. Prisons do not represent a barrier for the Camorra, according to Anna Maria Zaccaria, a sociologist at the University of Naples Federico II, researching the role of women in the syndicate. In 2009, Licciardi was released from prison after almost 8 years. On the 26th of June 2019, Licciardi managed to escape from a huge anti-Camorra operation against the Secondigliano alliance, becoming a fugitive. On the 12th of July 2019, the Court of Naples annulled the preventive detention order against Licciardi, sharing the legal questions raised by her lawyer, Dario Vanatiello. Licciardi was considered a free woman, despite her known role as the head of the Secondigliano alliance, one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the Campania region. She was arrested again at Rome's Ciampino airport by Carabinieri on the orders of Naples prosecutors, alleged to have been running extortion rackets as head of the Licciardi Camorra clan, on the 7th of August 2021 when attempting to travel to Spain.
You're watching the Everything Network.
The Corleonesi Mafia clan was a faction within the Corleone family of the Sicilian Mafia, formed in the 1970s. Notable leaders included Luciano Leggio, Salvatore Riina, Bernardo Provenzano, and Leo Luca Bagarella. Corleonesi affiliates were not restricted to mafiosi of Corleone. During the Second Mafia War in the early 1980s, the Corleonesi clan opposed the faction of the Palermitans represented by Gaetano Badalamenti, Stefano Bontattai, and Salvatore Inzerillo. The victory of the Corleonesi, and in particular the rise of Toto Riina, marked a new era in the history of the Sicilian Mafia. Between 1992 and 1993, the Corleonesi initiated a season of attacks against the state, followed by the State Mafia Pact. In February 1971, the Corleonesi clan's first boss, Luciano Leggio, ordered the kidnapping for extortion of Antonino Caruso, son of the industrialist Giacomo Caruso, and also that of the son of the builder Francesco Vassallo in Palermo. Leggio was linked to the murder of the general attorney of Sicily, Pietro Scaglione, who was shot dead on May 5, 1971, with his police bodyguard Antonino Lorusso. He became a fugitive and was finally captured in Milan on May 16, 1974, and sentenced to life imprisonment. By the end of the 1970s, his lieutenant Salvatore Riina, who was also a fugitive, was in control of the Corleonesi clan. The Corleonesi's primary rivals were Stefano Bontattai, Salvatore Inzerillo, and Tano Badalamenti, bosses of various powerful Palermo Mafia families. Between 1981 and 1983, Bontattai and Inzerillo, together with many associates and members of both their mafia and blood families, were killed. There were up to 1,000 killings during this period as Rina and the Corleonesi, together with their allies, wiped out their rivals. By the end of the war, the Corleonesi were effectively ruling the mafia, and over the next few years, Rina increased his influence by eliminating the Corleonesi's allies, such as Filippo Marchese, Giuseppe Greco, and Rosario Riccobono. In February 1980, Tommaso Buscetta fled to Brazil to escape the brewing Second Mafia War instigated by Rina. Whereas Rina's predecessors had kept a low profile, leading some in law enforcement to question the very existence of the mafia, Rina ordered the murders of judges, policemen, and prosecutors in an attempt to terrify the authorities. A law to create a new offense of mafia association and confiscate mafia assets was introduced by Pio La Torre, secretary of the Italian Communist Party in Sicily, but it had been stalled in Parliament for 2 years. La Torre was murdered on the 30th of April 1982. In May 1982, the Italian government sent Carlo Alberto Dalla Chiesa, a general of the Italian Carabinieri, to Sicily with orders to crush the mafia. However, not long after arriving on September 3, 1982, he was gunned down in the city center with his wife, Emanuela Setti Carraro, and his driver bodyguard, Domenico Russo. In response to public disquiet about the failure to effectively combat the organization Rina-headed, La Torre's law was passed 10 days later. On September 11, 1982, Buscetta's 2 sons from his first wife, Benedetto and Antonio, disappeared, never to be found again, which prompted his collaboration with Italian authorities. This was followed by the deaths of his brother Vincenzo, son-in-law Giuseppe Genova, brother-in-law Pietro, and 4 of his nephews, Domenico and Benedetto Buscetta, and Orazio and Antonio D'Amico. Buscetta was arrested in São Paulo, Brazil once again on October 23, 1983, and extradited to Italy on June 28, 1984. Buscetta asked to talk to the anti-mafia judge Giovanni Falcone and began his life as an informant, referred to as a pentito. Buscetta was the first high-profile Sicilian mafiosi to become an informant. He revealed that the mafia was a single organization led by a commission, or cupola, dome, thereby establishing that the top tier of mafia members were complicit in all the organization's crimes. Buscetta helped judges Falcone and Paolo Borsellino achieve significant success in the fight against organized crime that led to 475 mafia members indicted and 338 convicted in the Maxi trial. In an attempt to divert investigative resources away from Buscetta's key revelations, Rina ordered a terrorist-style atrocity, the December 23, 1984 904 train bombing. 17 people were killed and 267 wounded. It became known as the Christmas Massacre and was initially attributed to political extremists. It was only several years later, when police stumbled on explosives of the same type as used in Train 904 while searching the hideout of Giuseppe Calò, that it became apparent that the mafia had been behind the attack. As part of the Maxi trial, Rina was given 2 life sentences in absentia. Rina pinned his hopes on the lengthy appeal process that had frequently set convicted mafiosi free, and he suspended the campaign of murders against officials while the cases went to higher courts. When the convictions were upheld by the Supreme Court of Cassation in January 1992, the Council of Top Bosses headed by Rina reacted by ordering the assassination of Salvatore Lima on the grounds that he was an ally of Giulio Andreotti and Giovanni Falcone. On May 23, 1992, Falcone, his wife Francesca Morvillo, and 3 police officers died in the Capapayi bombing on Highway A29 outside Palermo. 2 months later, Borsellino was killed along with 5 police officers in the entrance to his mother's apartment block by a car bomb in Via D'Amelio. Both attacks were ordered by Rina. Ignazio Salvo, who had advised Rina against killing Falcone, was himself murdered on September 17, 1992. The public was outraged, both at the mafia and also the politicians who they felt had failed adequately to protect Falcone and Borsellino. The Italian government arranged for a massive crackdown against the mafia in response. News reports in May 2019 indicated that a mafia insider revealed that John Gotti of the Gambino crime family had sent one of their explosives experts to Sicily to work with the Corleonesi. This individual allegedly helped plan the bombing that would kill Falcone. One mafia expert was surprised that the two groups would cooperate because the American mafia was affiliated with the rivals of the Corleonesi. But another expert said the joint effort was understandable. It may be that the Gambinos at a certain point recognized that the Corleonesi had been victorious in the war between rival families in Sicily. There is nothing unusual in the traffic of personnel and ideas across the Atlantic. They were cousin organizations. According to John Dickey, professor of Italian Studies at University College London and the author of Mafia Republic, Italy's Criminal Curse. On the 15th of January 1993, Carabinieri arrested Rina at his villa in Palermo. He had been a fugitive for 23 years. After Rina's capture, a division emerged among the Corleonesi, and a series of bombings occurred by the Corleonesi against several tourist spots on the Italian mainland: the Via dei Giorgofili bombing in Florence, Via Palestro massacre in Milan, and the Piazza San Giovanni in Laterano, and Via San Teodoro in Rome, which left 10 people dead and 93 injured as well as severe damage. In total, Rina was given 26 life sentences and served his sentence in solitary confinement. Giovanni Brusca, one of Rina's hitmen who personally detonated the bomb that killed Falcone and became a state witness, pentito, after his arrest in 1996, has offered a controversial version of the capture of Toto Rina, a secret deal between Carabinieri officers, secret agents, and mafia bosses tired of the dictatorship of Rina's faction of the Corleonesi. According to Brusca, Provenzano sold Rina in exchange for the valuable archive of compromising material that Rina held in his apartment in Via Bernini 52 in Palermo. Some investigators believed that most of those who carried out murders for Cosa Nostra answered solely to Leoluca Bagarella, and that consequently, Bagarella actually wielded more power than Bernardo Provenzano, who was Rina's formal successor. Provenzano reportedly protested about the terroristic attacks, but Bagarella responded sarcastically, telling Provenzano to wear a sign saying, "I don't have anything to do with the massacres." On June 24, 1995, Bagarella was arrested, having been a fugitive for 4 years. In total, Bagarella was given 13 life sentences plus 106 years and 10 months, and solitary confinement for 6 years. Provenzano subsequently took the reins of the Corleonesi. Provenzano had been a fugitive from the law since 1963. Provenzano was finally captured on April 11, 2006, by the Italian police near his hometown Corleone. After the arrest of Provenzano, the power of the Corleonesi was greatly reduced. Corleonesi affiliates were not restricted to mafiosi of Corleone. The Corleone Mafia bosses initiated men of honor, not necessarily from Corleone, whose status was kept hidden from the other members of the Corleone Casca and other mafia families. Members of other mafia families who sided with Rina and Provenzano were called Corleonesi as well, forming a coalition that dominated the mafia in the 1980s and 1990s. That can be considered as a kind of parallel Cosa Nostra. Giovanni Brusca from the San Giuseppe Giotto Mafia family was considered to be part of the Corleonesi faction, for example. The pentito, mafia turncoat, Antonino Calderone provided first-hand accounts of the leaders of the Corleonesi, Luciano Leggio, Toto Rina, and Bernardo Provenzano. About Leggio, Calderone said he liked to kill. He had a way of looking at people that could frighten anyone, even us mafiosi. The smallest thing set him off, and then a strange light would appear in his eyes that created silence around him. When you were in his company, you had to be careful about how you spoke. The wrong tone of voice, a misconstrued word, and all of a sudden that silence. Everything would instantly be hushed, uneasy, and you could smell death in the air. The Corleone bosses were not educated at all, but they were cunning and diabolical, Calderone said about Rina and Provenzano. They were both clever and ferocious, a rare combination in Cosa Nostra. Calderone described Toto Rina as unbelievably ignorant, but he had intuition and intelligence and was difficult to fathom and very hard to predict. Rina was soft-spoken, highly persuasive, and often highly sentimental. He followed the simple codes of the brutal, ancient world of the Sicilian countryside, where force is the only law and there is no contradiction between personal kindness and extreme ferocity. His philosophy was that if someone's finger hurt, it was better to cut off his whole arm just to make sure, Calderone said. Another pentito, Leonardo Messina, described how the Corleonesi organized their rise to power. They took power by slowly killing everyone. We were kind of infatuated with them because we thought that getting rid of the old bosses, we would become the new bosses. Some people killed their brother, others their cousin, and so on, because they thought they would take their places. Instead, slowly, the Corleonesi gained control of the whole system. First, they used us to get rid of the old bosses. Then they got rid of all those who raised their heads, like Pino Greco, aka Scarpazzetta, Little Shoe, Mario Prestafilippo, and Vincenzo Puccio. All that's left are men without character, who are their puppets.
If you haven't already, please take a second to subscribe to the channel, and also don't forget to click on the notification bell, so you'll be up to date on all videos released from the Everything Network.
You're watching the Everything Network.
Luciano Leggio was one of 10 children raised in extreme poverty on a small farm. He turned to crime in his teens and received his first conviction at the age of 18 for stealing corn. Upon completing his 6-month sentence for the crime, Leggio murdered the man who had reported him to the police. In 1945, he was recruited by the mafia boss of Corleone, Michele Navarra, to work as an enforcer and hitman. That same year, he murdered a farmhand in order to take his job, then immediately took over the farm by demanding at gunpoint that the owner sign it over to him. While behind bars in the late 1940s, he met Salvatore Rina, who was then aged 19 and starting a 6-year sentence for manslaughter. The two eventually became accomplices in crime after Rina's release, as did 2 other young local criminals, Calogero Bagarella and Bernardo Provenzano. On March 10, 1948, Placido Rizzato, trade unionist, was kidnapped and murdered. The following year, 2 men confessed to helping Luciano Leggio kidnap Rizzato, who shot the victim and dumped him in a 15-meter deep, 49-feet cavern. Luciano went into hiding and was tried twice in absentia for Rizzato's murder. Michele Navarra tried to have him killed in June 1958. He was invited by Navarra to meet him at an estate, but instead, he found 15 armed men there. The hitman hired for the task did a poor job, and Leggio escaped with just minor injuries. The event left him and his followers with the knowledge that they were as good as dead if they did not strike back soon. A few weeks later, on August 2, 1958, Navarra and a fellow doctor, Giovanni Russo, who had nothing to do with criminal activities, were both shot to death on an isolated country road as they drove home in Navarra's Fiat 1100. The car was blocked on the open road by 2 other vehicles and riddled with submachine gun bullets. A few weeks later, on September 6th, 3 men known as Friends of Navarra were killed in a raid at Corleone. Reciprocal killings went on until 1963, and Luciano had to disappear, having been condemned for the killing of Navarra. Luciano Leggio thus became the boss of the Corleone Mafia. Among Navarra's suspected killers were Bernardo Provenzano and Salvatore Toto Rina. He was captured in Corleone on May 14, 1964, at the house of Leolucina Sorisi, the former girlfriend of Rizzato. Leggio was imprisoned at Ucciardone prison in Palermo, but in December 1968, he was acquitted for lack of evidence in the trial held in Catanzaro against the protagonists of the First Mafia War, and also of that held in Bari in 1969, in which he was accused of the murders that took place in Corleone starting in 1958. The trial was regarded as farcical, with reports of blatant witness intimidation and evidence tampering. For example, fragments of a broken car light found at the Navarra murder scene, which had been identified as belonging to an Alfa Romeo car owned by Leggio, had, by the time of the trial, been replaced by bits of a broken light from a completely different make of car. The judges and prosecutors were sent anonymous letters threatening them with death. Immediately after the trial, which ended in 1969, a determined Italian magistrate named Cesare Terranova appealed against Leggio's acquittal for the Navarra slaying. After hearing of his indictment to stand trial once more, he checked into a private health clinic in Rome to have treatment for pot disease, which he had suffered from most of his life, and for which he had to wear a brace. Leggio then relocated to Milan. In February of 1971, Luciano Leggio ordered the kidnapping for extortion of Antonino Caruso, son of the industrialist Giacomo Caruso, and also that of the son of the builder Francesco Vassallo in Palermo. He was linked to the murder of the general attorney of Sicily, Pietro Scaglione, who was shot dead on May 5, 1971, with his police bodyguard, Antonino Lorusso. Leggio was finally captured in Milan on May 16, 1974. He was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1975 and imprisoned at the Badue Carros prison in Nuoro, Sardinia. He is believed to have retained significant influence from behind bars, including commissioning the 1977 murder of Lieutenant Colonel Giuseppe Russo. Luciano had ordered the 1979 killing of Judge Terranova as a revenge for the insult at the interrogation in the 1960s. The murder was approved by the Sicilian Mafia Commission. He was charged with ordering Terranova's murder, but was acquitted for lack of evidence, both in the first trial, which was held in Reggio Calabria in 1983, and 3 years later, in 1986, in the appeal process. By the end of the 1970s, his lieutenant Salvatore Riina was in control of the Corleonese clan. In the Maxi trial of 1986 through 87, the jury rejected the prosecution's call for 15 years imprisonment for Leggio, and the jury acquitted him of 4 murders that prosecutors charged he had masterminded from his jail cell in Sardinia. On November 15, 1993, he died in prison from a heart attack, aged 68. He is buried in Corleone.
Matteo Denaro was born in Castelvetrano in the province of Trapani, Sicily. His father, Francesco Messina Denaro, known as Don Ciccio, was the capo mandamento of Castelvetrano. Matteo learned to use a gun at 14. He once bragged, "I filled a cemetery all by myself." He made a reputation by murdering rival boss Vincenzo Milazzo from Alcamo and strangling Milazzo's 3-month pregnant girlfriend. His father started as a campiere, armed guard, of the Dali family, wealthy landowners who were among the founders of the Banca Sicula. He became the fattore, overseer of an estate, of the Dali land holdings. They handed over a significant estate in the area of Zangara, Castelvetrano, to Matteo Messina Denaro. However, the real new owner turned out to be Salvatore Riina, leader of the Corleonese Mafia clan, with whom Messina Denaro was allied. Antonio Dali Sr. had to resign from the board of the Banca Sicula in 1983 because he appeared on the list of the secret Freemason lodge Propaganda Due of Licio Gelli. His son Antonio Dali Jr. became a senator for Silvio Berlusconi's Forza Italia party in 1996, and in April 2001, Undersecretary at the Ministry of the Interior, the institution responsible for fighting organized crime. His cousin Giacomo Dali is a councillor of the Banca Commerciale Italiana, Comet, in Milan, which acquired the Banca Sicula in 1991. Matteo's brother Salvatore Messina Denaro, arrested in November 1998, worked at the Banca Sicula and continued to work for Comet. Messina Denaro is often portrayed as a ruthless playboy mafioso and womanizer, driving an expensive Porsche sports car and wearing a Rolex Daytona watch, Ray-Ban sunglasses, and fancy clothes from Giorgio Armani and Versace. He was an ardent player of computer games and is said to be the father of an extramarital child, which is unusual in the conservative culture of the mafia. Messina Denaro had a reputation for fast living and allegedly killed a Sicilian hotel owner who accused him of taking young girls to bed. As such, he was remarkably different from traditional mafia bosses like Salvatore Riina and Bernardo Provenzano, who claimed to adhere to conservative family values. After the natural death of his father in November 1998, Matteo became capo mandamento of the area, including Castelvetrano and the neighboring cities, while Vincenzo Virga ruled in the city of Trapani and its surroundings. After the arrest of Virga in 2001, Messina Denaro took over the leadership of the mafia in the province of Trapani. He was said to command some 900 men and apparently reorganized the 20 mafia families in Trapani into one single mandamento, separated from the rest of Cosa Nostra. The Trapani Mafia is considered the Zoccolo Duro, solid pedestal of Cosa Nostra, and the most powerful, except for the families in Palermo. Messina Denaro got his money through an extensive extortion racket, forcing businesses to pay a pizzo, protection money, and through skimming off public construction contracts. The family owns substantial sand quarries. He was also active in the international drug trade, allegedly with the Contrera Caruana clan, which attracted the attention of the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation. He also made money through legitimate business. He had stakes in a Sicilian supermarket chain and owned vast olive groves. He was involved in olive oil production in a corrupt business, which used cheap African labor. According to the Direzione Distrettuale Antimafia, DDA of Palermo, he had interests in Venezuela and contacts with Colombian drug trafficking cartels, as well as the 'Ndrangheta. His illicit networks extend to Belgium and Germany. Messina Denaro had strong links with mafia families in Palermo, in particular in Brancaccio, the territory of the Graviano family. Filippo Guttadaro, the brother of the Giuseppe Guttadaro, the regent of the Brancaccio Mafia, while Giuseppe Graviano and Filippo Graviano are in jail, is the brother-in-law of Messina Denaro. They are involved in cocaine trafficking in agreement with 'Ndrangheta clans from Plati, Marina di Gioiosa Ionica, and Siderno, as well as the mafia family of Mariano Agai. After bomb attacks in Capaci and Via D'Amelio that killed prosecutors Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, the arrest of Salvatore Riina on January 15, 1993, and the introduction of strict prison regime, Cosa Nostra embarked on a terrorist campaign in which Messina Denaro played a prominent role. The remaining mafia bosses, among them Messina Denaro, Giovanni Brusca, Leoluca Bagarella, Antonino Gioè, Giuseppe Graviano and Gioacchino La Barbera, met several times, often in the Santa Flavia area in Bulgaria, on an estate owned by the mafioso Leonardo Greco. They decided on a strategy to force the Italian state to retreat. That resulted in a series of bomb attacks in the Via dei Giorgofili in Florence, in Via Palestro in Milan, in the Piazza San Giovanni in Laterano, and Via San Teodoro in Rome, which left 10 people dead and 93 injured, as well as damage to centers of cultural heritage, such as the Uffizi Gallery. Messina Denaro also tailed the TV journalist Maurizio Costanzo, host of the Maurizio Costanzo Show, who just escaped a car bomb attack on 14th of May 1993. He also observed the movements of Giovanni Falcone and the Minister of Justice, Claudio Martelli, in 1991. After the 1993 bombings, Messina Denaro went into hiding as of June 1993. According to investigators, between 1994 and 1996, Messina Denaro spent time in his hiding place, located between Aspra and Bulgaria, with his lover Maria Mezzi, with whom he went on vacation to Greece, under the false name of Matteo Cracolici. In 1995, Messina Denaro, who by then had a daughter from a previous relationship with Francesca Alagna, went to live with his mother. In a letter addressed to a friend, seized by investigators, Messina Denaro revealed that he had never met this daughter. In 2000, Maria Messi was arrested, and because police found love letters that she had exchanged with Messina Denaro, the following year, she was sentenced to 3 years in prison for aiding and abetting together with her brother, Francesco. In July 2006, investigators found other love letters from Maria Messi at the home of Filippo Gutadouro, who had the task of delivering them to his brother-in-law, Messina Denaro. On May 6, 2002, Messina Denaro was sentenced in absentia to life imprisonment for his role in the bombings of 1993. According to Giusy Vitale, a pentita, in 1998, Messina Denaro was one of the young Turks within Cosa Nostra who wanted to set aside Bernardo Provenzano. In addition to Messina Denaro, they were Giovanni Brusca, Domenico Raccuglia, and Vito Vitale. The younger bosses wanted to take strategic decisions without prior consent of Provenzano. They told him to go home and take care of your family. After the arrest of Provenzano on the 11th of April 2006, Messina Denaro was often mentioned as his successor. His main rivals were supposed to be Salvatore Lo Piccolo, boss of the Mandamento of San Lorenzo, Palermo, and Domenico Raccuglia from Altafonte. Provenzano allegedly nominated Messina Denaro in one of his pizzini, which are small slips of paper used to communicate with other mafiosi to avoid phone conversations. Messina Denaro used the pseudonym Alessio in his clandestine correspondence with former mafia boss Provenzano. He suffers from severe myopia and received treatment for this condition at a clinic in Barcelona, Spain, in 1994 and 1996. This presupposed that Provenzano had the power to nominate a successor, which was not unanimously accepted among mafia observers. According to anti-mafia prosecutor Antonio Ingroia of the Direzione Distrettuale Antimafia, DDA of Palermo, the mafia today is more of a federation and less of an authoritarian state, referring to the previous period of authoritarian rule under Salvatore Riina. Ingroia says that Provenzano established a kind of directorate of about 4 to 7 men who met very infrequently, only when necessary, when there were strategic decisions to make. According to Ingroia, in an organization like the mafia, a boss has to be one step above the others, otherwise it all falls apart. It all depends on whether he can manage consensus and whether the others agree or rebel. For Ingroia, Provenzano guaranteed a measure of stability because he had the authority to quash internal disputes. According to Sergio Lari, deputy chief prosecutor of Palermo, either the directorate can choose a successor or we could again be in for a fiery time. Ingroia said that it was unlikely that there would be an all-out war over who would fill Provenzano's shoes. He said, "Right now, I don't think that's probable." Of the two possible successors, Ingroia thought Lo Piccolo was the more likely heir to the mafia throne, saying, "He's from Palermo, and that's still the most powerful mafia stronghold." After the arrest of Salvatore Lo Piccolo in November 2007, Messina Denaro was generally viewed as one of the possible leading mafia bosses. According to Antonio Ingroia, one of the prosecutors of the Direzione Distrettuale Antimafia, DDA of Palermo, the main leading figures in Cosa Nostra at that point, Messina Denaro, Giovanni Riina, Domenico Raccuglia, Pietro Tagliavia, and Gianni Nicchi, were still too young to be recognized as leading bosses of the organization. The police believed that Messina Denaro was hiding out close to his family home at Castelvetrano and moved between safe houses. On the 15th of November 2009, Domenico Raccuglia was arrested in a small town near Trapani, having been convicted for murder and other crimes. He was facing 3 life sentences. On the 18th of November 2008, Italian authorities seized €700 million in assets from the supermarket king of Sicily, Giuseppe Grigoli, traceable to Messina Denaro. The assets included 12 businesses, 220 real estate holdings, including villas and apartment blocks, and 133 land holdings, for a total of 60 hectares. Grigoli was arrested in December 2007 after authorities found documents linking him to Messina Denaro in the hideout where Provenzano was arrested in April 2006. Grigoli has the exclusive franchise for Western Sicily of the Spar supermarket chain. This is one of the most important operations in recent years, said Palermo prosecutor Roberto Scarpinato. Investigators believed that through his supermarkets, Grigoli was able to launder illicit profits for Cosa Nostra and give legal cover to mafiosi. Having conquered the food distribution market, Grigoli was able to give jobs to hundreds of people close to Cosa Nostra or recommended by the Mafia, Scarpinato said. He added that from evidence discovered on tiny paper scrap messages found in the hut where Provenzano was arrested, Messina Denaro knew to the last comma the accounts of Grigoli's supermarket. In January 2010, police seized construction companies, villas, shops, and vehicles worth some €550 million from a Western Sicilian construction magnate, Rosario Cascio, believed to be one of the main bankrollers and money launderers for Messina Denaro. Together with €700 million in assets taken from supermarket magnate Giuseppe Grigoli at the end of 2008, and €200 million from construction tycoon Francesco Pecora in November 2009. In total, 1.4 billion were seized, which was seen as a clear reminder of the deep-rooted economic power of Messina Denaro. In September 2010, police seized a record amount of assets, worth €1.5 billion, from Sicilian businessman Vito Nicastri, accused of working with Messina Denaro. He had invested in wind and solar energy sources as a way of laundering money. The Italian police applied a new strategy to try to capture Messina Denaro, arresting scores of his underlings and seizing millions of euros in assets. The circle is closing around the number one fugitive, Interior Minister Roberto Moroni said. Palermo Chief Prosecutor Francesco Messineo added that the aim of the strategy against Messina Denaro was to dry up the water he swims in. With the arrest of Ghirlandino Messina, the alleged boss of Agrigento, on the 23rd of October 2010, in Favara, Agrigento province, the circle around Messina Denaro tightened even more, as notes addressed specifically to Messina Denaro to discuss territorial division were thought likely to provide clues to his whereabouts and recent activities. In December 2014, there was a mention of Italian police coming close to apprehending Messina Denaro after they made an estimated €20 million seizure of his assets, in the form of valuable olive groves in Trapani. Wiretaps had revealed Messina Denaro was receiving funding from the Fountain of Gold olive oil business based in the region. In December 2017, over 200 Italian police officers executed search warrants at properties owned by around 30 Italian mafiosi in and near Castelvetrano, his hometown, in the search for Messina Denaro. In November 2018, Italian businessman Carmelo Patti, accused of working with Messina Denaro, had €1.5 billion of his assets seized by Italian police on the basis that they related to the proceeds of crime. On the 20th of October 2020, Messina Denaro was sentenced in absentia to life imprisonment by the Corte d'Assise for having been one of the instigators of the Capazzi bombing and Via D'Amelio bombing. After his capture in January 2023, the sentence was confirmed on the 18th of July 2023. On the 12th of August 2021, TG1 released the first ever voice recording of Messina Denaro. The recording originated from an archived cassette tape of the court of Marsala until it was recovered by local anti-mafia associations and news outlets. The recording dated from 18th of March 1993, taking place in the court of Marsala regarding a murder case in Partana. Messina Denaro testified in the case, and almost 3 months later was deemed a fugitive. On the 10th of September 2021, there was a Dutch news report that Messina Denaro might have been arrested 2 days earlier while in a restaurant in The Hague, after receiving a tip from Italian authorities. However, Dutch prosecutors confirmed later that it was not Denaro, but instead a man from Liverpool. Following this incident, severe criticism was directed toward Italian authorities. On the 30th of September 2021, TG2 revealed the first known video of Messina Denaro. The sighting came from a security camera in the area of the Valle del Boliche in December 2009. The footage shows a Mitsubishi Pajero driving through the valley, revealing at least 2 occupants. The front passenger is supposedly Messina Denaro. In October 2021, Italian authorities launched a manhunt across Sicily. On the 16th of January 2023, Messina Denaro was arrested in Sicily by Italian police after being a fugitive since 1993. His arrest came almost exactly 30 years after that of Reina, who was taken into custody on the 15th of January 1993, also in Palermo. Over 100 members of the armed forces were involved in the arrest of Messina Denaro, who was detained in Palermo at a private clinic where he was receiving treatment for colon cancer, reportedly visiting the clinic under a fake name for chemotherapy. Italian media reported that Messina Denaro was captured just before 10 CET and taken to a secret location by the Carabinieri. At the time of his arrest, Messina Denaro's assets were estimated to be at least 4 billion. During the night, he was transferred by a secret military flight to the prison of L'Aquila under the Article 41 bis prison regime. The prison has an oncology ward and is the nearest place to Rome where he was to be put under interrogation by the Italian magistrates.
On the 24th of September 2023, Messina Denaro fell into an irreversible coma and died in the early morning on the 25th of September 2023 at age 61.
On the 24th of September 2023, Messina Denaro fell into an irreversible coma and died in the early morning on the 25th of September 2023 at age 61.